Alright, so for my field journal, the first entry is at UC Merced's North Lake, which is ironic because it's not really at the north end of the lake and north end of the school, it's on the south end, even though I don't know why it's referred to as the North Lake. Um, so, quick run through, this is the drawing where the water goes through to the little bridge area back to school. There's a bunch of plants and stuff that are growing all around the edges of the water. Um, I actually got a bucket and was trying to pull out the water to see the quality of it. It's actually very clear and very cold. The plants around the area made it very troublesome to get the actual water, but I noticed that a lot of the plants that are growing there were some that were like kind of looking like watermelons, but I don't believe they are watermelons. I wasn't sure exactly what they were. I also noticed that there was a fish that was there, and there's a little pond area near the end of the lake, which is very murky waters, but the actual water that runs through the river is actually very clear and very cold. For March 23rd, I had a friend of mine that was a TA at the school allow me to go to I forgot what it was called, but the reserve area that was at the back of our school. We went to the barn that got blown down. He gave me a tour around up to the area, gave me an description of the invasive species that were coming in and taking over like the grassland area. We got to observe the actual barn that was blown down. So here's the pathway that leads to the gate that's on the side, and here's the broken barn area and just a bunch of grass. I was also informed that they have cattle that come in occasionally to graze down the plant species. We actually saw quite a bit of birds and a few squirrels, but other than that, not very much else. For March 27th, my friends and I went to Alameda Quicksilver County Park, which is in the Bay. The drive took us about an hour. We packed about 2 backpacks full of snacks. The trip we had a lot of trees and plants, but then at the same time when we got to the peak, we got to see a lot of like the residentials that are along the other mountaintops that are alongside us. We didn't really get to see any animals in the area, but there were lots of trees and plants and rivers that we got to take pictures of and of the sorts. Other than that, I don't exactly know what the plant species were, but I actually had the pictures that I had already sent to you for this hiking trip that I had. April 27th, let's see, which one was this one? Okay, so my housemates and I had actually gone to Lake Yosemite for this one. There was a barbecue event for one of the clubs, and I was invited to go. So I did my field journal at Lake Yosemite, which is on the north end of the school. The water at the surface, if you just look at it, it looks fairly clear, but if you actually get a closer look, it was actually very murky. We were told something about fairy shrimp being in the waters, either there or in the reserve, but I never noticed any of it, so it might not be in the time when they're actually spawning or whatnot. The grass was fairly kept in the sense that it was cut. There was very sparse trees in the area. We didn't really get to see many like animals or anything. There were birds that flew overhead, but I didn't really get to notice any like squirrels or anything. So, and because the area is very just open, I didn't really feel like I should draw something because it'd just be a big open lake like I had for the Russian River, so I didn't want to repeat that. So for the April 14th, I originally was planning on going to the field excursion with the class, but because of the project and my group needing to finish the podcast, we ended up not going and just doing the podcast. So I ended up choosing to do my field excursion outside of Ferris's house area because it's actually a relatively new area that they're trying to like build up, that the companies are building up. There was a lot of grassy areas around that were fairly dried out. In front of his house, so the entrance to his house is in a little alleyway. There was a big tree that was growing up, and in front of all of his neighbors' houses there were a bunch of flowers and plants, and it was actually really nice. But other than the fact that there's no animals in the area because it's a residential, and there wasn't really many birds that flew overhead. It was in a very weird portion of town. This was on April 14th. So on April 21st, I actually went to the park that was on Yosemite Drive. It was a very open area with little to no weeds and nicely kept grass with a sparse amount of trees in the area. There was lots of kids playing basketball, and there was lots of birds, and I noticed a lot of squirrels in the area. I don't know if it has to do with it being a park, somehow attracts the squirrels, but I found it curious because of all the other places that I've been to. I noticed more squirrels in this area than any of the other areas, so I found that very interesting. My drawing would be of, here's the basketball court, and here's the grassy areas over here, and I had a tree over here, so this is basically the only court that was at the actual park, so I kind of drew that because it's the one thing that kind of stood out. So on April 22nd, we went to Heights Cove on a field excursion, and basically it was a very lovely area with a lot of blooming flowers. The guides actually gave us lots of information about the types of flowers and the different trees, and they answered a lot of the questions that the other students had. We actually got a rundown on poison oak and how to notice it and avoid it, which kind of didn't help out for me. Well, it helped, but I still ended up catching it somehow. We actually got to this one area where there was a huge rock formation that we were told was sedimentary rock that was shifted by plate tectonics, so the groovings on it was very like waved, so it was actually very interesting to see. We also got to see the groundwork of the living areas that the miners in Heights Cove had, even though the actual buildings were fairly destroyed, to the point where it wasn't really existent, and the cable bridge was also destroyed. The picture I had is a rough sketch of the rock structure and how the actual formations, you could see that it'd be very waved lines. I wrote on the side here that the rock formation on the river with the grains of it, and yes, that would be my field journal of 7 entries. The last week I didn't get a chance to do one. I've been very occupied with finals, but this is my field journal for the second half of the semester.